Jesse Rabinowitz, Communications Director for the National Homeless Law Center, to the show. And Jesse, you were just telling us, but I don't think people heard it. There in Utah is planning some type of camp for unhoused people. Tell us what you know about this.
We know that this camp and this idea should send chills up everyone's spine. We should not have to be saying out loud that forcing people into a camp is a bad idea, but that is where we are yet again in this country. Utah's governor, inspired by the Trump administration's attacks on homeless people, is proposing to create what will be the largest government-run detention camp for homeless people, with upwards of 1,300 beds, including 800 beds where people will be forcibly held against their will. This diverts funding from proven solutions to homelessness, like housing and support, to instead build a literal detention facility for people who just can't pay the rent. It's shameful, and it must not happen.
What is the authority to? Is this a jail? Like, what is the authority that Utah has to put people in a concentration camp?
I love that question. So there is a growth of anti-homeless laws springing up around the country that largely stem from a billionaire-backed right-wing think tank called the Cicero Institute, which was founded by Palantir CEO Joe Lonsdale. And the Cicero Institute has been moderately effective in passing anti-homeless laws at the state level, including in Utah. So Utah has a law on the books, thanks to these billionaires, that says it is illegal to sleep outside. So now what Utah is going to do is say your choice is either to go to jail or your choice is to go to a detention camp in the middle of nowhere. Those aren't real choices, and they don't solve homelessness. They make homelessness worse.
I remember that name because it's so, egregiously libertarian sounding, the Cicero Institute. Because last year I remember there was a story about this guy in Texas and how effective he had been. I believe it was in Austin, right? This the tech billionaire Joe Lonsdale, who's his data stuff has been used by ICE, the CIA. Mm-hmm. He did a documentary with PragerU. So this is like deeply, deeply right-wing stuff.
Okay, but back to the point of the thing, like how long will people, okay, you get a jail term and someone says you have broken the law because you have no home. How long are people forced to stay in this concentration camp?
We don't know.
So there's just no structure to this whatsoever. But the law is on the books that you can go to jail. So are they putting people in jail right now in Utah?
Well, what they're doing right now, the governor released his budget, I believe, last week and included $45 million to fund this detention camp. And right now it's our understanding that there is still a significant chunk of cash that they need, and we expect them to be asking HUD to fund the rest. I want to remind folks that HUD Secretary Scott Turner was asked during his confirmation hearing if he supported forcing homeless people in detention camps, and he failed to answer. We believe that anyone who cannot unequivocally say forcing people into detention camps is not only not fit to run HUD, they're just not fit to run the federal government. But it's important that we remember Trump has talked about this for a long time. This is something he has campaigned on. And now these billionaires at the Cicero Institute are really shaping homelessness policy. It should scare all of us. And honestly, everyone who cares about justice needs to be mobilizing against these attacks on people who can't afford rent.
And so they have tens of millions of dollars. They're looking for federal grants to build this. I assume this is all going to some type of private prison company that will build this facility. Have they started to build it?
They haven't started to build it yet. They're still waiting on the rest of the funding. So the governor's budget came out a few weeks ago, and that was the first indication that this was a top priority for Governor Cox. So now we are looking to see where they plan to get the rest of the funding.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to know a little bit more about that connection then with the Trump administration. Like, how intimate is that connection? Because it appears like, based on what, we've been speaking about, that this is pretty directly linked to some of Trump's top donors.
Well, I want to say two things about that. One is that Donald Trump is using homelessness as a wedge issue to enact his authoritarian takeover of the country. Where I am in DC, it is no secret that his federal occupation of DC began with attacks on homeless people. And I was there when federal agents harassed homeless people and when the government threw away people's belongings for sleeping outside. And when we think about Trump's attacks, we often think about his attacks on immigrants, his attacks on trans folks, which are urgent and demand focus, but we also need to focus his attacks on homeless people. And then Joe Lonsdale, the former Palantir CEO, billionaire, is good friends with folks like J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. And when we see the homelessness policy coming out of the White House, it has the Cicero Institute's fingerprints all over it. Billionaires are the last people in this country who should be shaping homelessness policy because they don't care and they don't know what it's like to do the work or to experience homelessness. We know that despite what these billionaires say, the solution to homelessness is housing and supports, not handcuffs or detention camps.
Is there any attempt by in Utah, and I imagine this is like, what we're seeing is a proof of concept type of program, right? Like a pilot program for the rest of, I would imagine, mostly red states for the most part. But are they expending any money to build housing, to provide housing, to in any other programs for unhoused people in Utah?
Utah has a definite lack of shelter capacity and a lack of housing that people can afford. One of the things that's so insidious about this detention camp is that it actually will take the money that should be funding housing and supports and also mental health care, and instead redirect that funding to the creation of a detention camp. So they're actively taking money away from the solutions to fund this cruel, inhumane, and ineffective project.
It's almost like a blend of debtors' prisons, which are supposed to be illegal in this country, and involuntary commitment to mental institutions from the 20th century. That's what it feels like, a combination of, and it's federalized, or at least it has federal backing.
I think that's absolutely right. We know that in no time in this country or in history has rounding people up and forcing them into camps been a good thing. But that is exactly what Utah, with the backing of the Trump administration, is working towards. It's shameful and we have to stop it. Thankfully, there are amazing advocates in Utah working at the city and state level to stop this, and we're honored to support them in their advocacy and working to make sure that this deranged plan in Utah doesn't go anywhere else.
We got Utah, I guess, on the IM saying that there is at the package stores or liquor stores, the government, the state-owned ones, there's an option to round up purchases to help with homelessness services. Is that where this money is going towards? Are they building a fund right now to build this camp, or do you not know?
I don't know. I'm not certain, but I know that small little changes like that are not actually going to fund those solutions to homelessness. In order to solve homelessness, we have to fix our housing system, which right now only works for people like Joe Lonsdale, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump. And we have to build a housing system where everyone, regardless of what they do, what they look like, or where they're from, has a safe place to live. That is not what Utah is doing. Utah is showing us the exact wrong thing to do. But I know that in cities and states across the country, more and more people are recognizing that the rent is too damn high, and that when the rent goes up, so does homelessness. And we are going to force our elected officials to focus on real proven solutions to homelessness, like housing and support.
Where is there a state in the country that is actually doing stuff that you, I mean, I imagine a lot of your time is spent talking about stuff that is like scary, like this, frankly. Are there states that are doing it correctly?
There are cities and states across the country that are doing the best they can with limited resources. And we know that when folks get housing and support, they don't experience homelessness anymore and they thrive. I used to be a homeless street outreach worker in DC, and watching my clients connect to housing was transformative for their lives and for the community. But the truth is, more people are entering into homelessness than we can support, because the federal government has abdicated their responsibility, not just under the Trump administration, under many previous federal administrations, We have to stem the flow of people into homelessness, and that requires fundamentally reshaping our housing system and moving it away from a profit-driven housing system and one towards a realization that everybody needs a place to stay and a place to live. But housing first, this idea that we can match people with housing and support, works. It has over a 90% approval rating. I'm sorry, not a 90% efficacy rating. The only people who are trying to poke holes in that are people like the billionaires at the Cicero Institute who have an agenda to gain.
And you know, that 90% effectiveness, it seems to me that one of the talking points that we hear on the right is focused on the 10% that it's not effective for. There are people who have serious mental or emotional challenges who are on the street. There are people who are on the street who don't want who don't want to be in a house. But again, I would imagine that the percentage of those people who have some mental or emotional challenges is pretty high. That seems to always be put in the sort of the front of the line in terms of like saying, well, this is why we've got to send everybody to some type of like a concentration camp or a mental facility. When in fact, about 90% of those people would, if you gave them the opportunity to live in a place, and they would, maybe even higher. But what do you do about those remaining things, or those folks, as a way of addressing what seems to be the big talking point on the right?
Well, first, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you were on a lifeboat and there were 10 people in your lifeboat and there were 5 life rafts, 5 people drowned, 5 people survived, you wouldn't say the life vests don't work. You would say we need more of them. But right now, the right is trying to say, throw away all of the life vests. That won't work. Number 2, stop making homelessness worse. Stop cutting budgets that force people into homelessness or force people who were homeless and now stably housed back into homelessness. Stop passing laws like these aggressive anti-homeless laws that we've seen spread across the country since the grants passed ruling about 17 months ago. But everyone needs a place to live, and a place to live is the foundation for getting your health back on track, finding employment, reconnecting with your loved ones. And we know that getting someone in housing first and then surrounding them with the wraparound resources that they want and need works time and time again. We also know that most people who have a mental health issue or a drug use issue will never be homeless. And most people who use drugs or have mental health issues will stay in housing for their entire lives. So we have it backwards. We're looking to blame people for individual failings, but the fact is our politicians are asleep at the wheel. Half of people in this country struggle to pay rent. Housing is too expensive. Healthcare is too expensive. Food is too expensive. The solution is to help people, not to force them into a literal government-run detention camp. But again, that is exactly what Utah wants to do. I have to say that as a social worker, this idea of forced institutionalization is deeply, deeply unsettling. It is unethical. But we also know it doesn't work. Emma was talking about these debtors' prisons and these institutions. We used to do forced institutionalization in this country, and we don't anymore. We stopped doing it because it was ineffective and it didn't work. But again, the Trump administration wants to bring us backwards to a time where you could throw people in jail for being poor, sick, and disabled. We must not let them.
Jesse Rabinowitz, Communications Director for the National Homelessness Law Center. We'll put a link to that organization. Folks want to help your work. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, don't